Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has met with his Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic counterpart, President Brahim Ghali. The two heads of state reflected on a number of burning issues, such as an amicable solution to the conflict between Saharawi and Morocco. AfriWorldView reporter Natasha Piri filed this report.
In 2004, South Africa took a decision to recognize the Saharawi Arab Democratic Republic as an independent state, a resolution our nation has chosen to support and stick by. The country's number one reiterated that the occupation of the Western Sahara by Morocco is illegal and that Sahrawi people must be allowed to exercise their rights to self-determination.
The struggle of the Sahrawi people has been discussed extensively in a number of forums around the world. The UN is one, the AU as well, and the various regions also on the African continent, including SADC, have also discussed this issue. So it's enjoyed a lot of discussions. And obviously the people of Sahrawi need to express their views and their own aspirations. And we obviously would be supportive.
The Sahrawi people, who have been at the receiving end of the Moroccans' harsh treatment, are adamant that all attempts to expel their nation will never see the light of day.
هي محاولة تشتيت وتفرقة وحدة شعوب.
The attempts by Morocco to expel the Sahrawi Republic will never happen, because this does not exist in the Constitutive Act of the African Union and cannot happen. The Sahrawi Republic is a founding member of the African Union and is there to remain.
President Ramaphosa further called for the implementation of engagements between Western Sahara and Morocco.
Fully committed to a speedy implementation of the resolution of the 30th AU Summit in January 2018, calling on the Sahrawi African Democratic Republic and the Kingdom of Morocco to engage without precondition in direct and serious talks.
As the visit coincides with the centenary of Utata Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu, President Ghali says the Sahrawi people will celebrate their legacies on the 12th of October during their country's National Unity Day. President Cyril Ramaphosa says that he is most certain that the people of Sahrawi will be free one day. Meanwhile, his counterpart, President Brahim Ghali, stresses and emphasizes that Morocco should oblige by the African Union Constitution. Natasha Piri, AfriWorldView in Swane.
Now, for more on that story, we're joined in studio by Jean Botha, spokesperson for the Congolese diaspora in South Africa. Mr. Botha, thank you so much for your time. Now, in light of that, I just want to read a quote quickly. Now, the suffering that the people of Sahrawi are going through now at the refugee camps will be sufficient evidence that this colonization must come to an end. That was our president when he hosted the president, when he hosted his counterpart. Firstly, this brings to mind this question. Now, how does a country like South Africa act as a formidable force, as a formidable backer of the country, and go beyond just attending summits and sending out statements? How do they act as really actively back the country?
Well, first of all, and thanks to your viewers that are watching these AfroWorld views, and that is actually giving the perception of the African people regarding our continent. And with regard to your question with Your Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, I think that is very important at this stage that an African leader is taking a strong and firm consideration to back up a country that has been under occupation. And I'm saying under occupation for many years because I myself come from a country that is under occupation. So this is very important to us Africans. Why? Because Aikwe Arma once wrote, the beautiful ones are not yet born. But I think with the new leader that you have as the head of the South African Republic, we have a leader that is in the caliber of the Kwame Nkrumah, Modibo Keïta, Haile Selassie, that can take the resolution of a country that hasn't had peace for many years, and I would say many years since 1973. So it is very important as an African country to support one another as African countries and to bring peace and stability in the Western Sahara Republic. The endemic suffering of these people has been going for a long time now. I would say 6 decades, if not more. We know that since they've gotten their independence from the Spanish, there has been no peace because they were torn between Algeria, the Front Polisario, and they were also torn with Morocco and Mauritania. So 3 countries were involved in the Western Sahara. It's a small country of about less than 500,000 people. So they should actually taste peace. That is very important for the development of any country. And I really commend the stance that His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa has taken to provide the platform so that there could be an amicable resolution of the conflict that has been going on between the Western Sahara and Morocco mainly at this point of time.
Now, last year, after more than 3 decades, Morocco was readmitted into the African Union. Now, perhaps a very fundamental question here. Do you think that King Mohammeds' wealth factored into them being readmitted into the Union?
I don't think it's all about wealth necessarily, but I do think that as Africans, it is important that we underline the fact that we need to share our Ubuntu, we need to be human and see the suffering of other people and say, at a given stage, things need to have an end so that we bring happiness to our African brothers and sisters that are in the other countries. What is at stake here? It's mainly the other countries, I'll say the imperialists, that are also pulling the strings here and there. For me, it's key and critical for Mohammed VI, who came into power. He was very young, I do believe, 3 or 4 decades ago. So it's about time that he has matured. And we know that in our African society, we understand that when somebody is going older, is getting white hair, he becomes also wiser. And that's maybe the wisdom that has brought to him to say, this is the time I need to make peace, and this is the time I could reintegrate the African Union and find a way forward to be reintegrated in the African Union. I think it's a good move for him right away.
Now, if King Mohammed's wealth didn't factor into this, perhaps what would the rationale be behind the AU formally accepting Morocco, while having formally recognized the SAADR as the official sovereign power here? I think the rationale here is also that, one cancels out the other.
I don't think we need to cancel the other because we are all Africans at the bottom line. So, and as Africans, it is important that we come to the table and we discuss our issues rather than canceling and being in a conflict. Because at the end, when 2 elephants are fighting, it is the grass that is suffering. And at this point of time, with the wisdom that the King Mohammed VI has, he truly considered that it is important that they come to the African Union, as well as the recognition of the Western Sahara, to be there to discuss with the peers of the African Union and find an amicable solution to the crisis. I think 3 or 4 decades, it's too many for the suffering of Africans in general.
But is it realistic, though, to expect these 2 elephants, as you say, to come together and break bread, given the extensive history that's behind these 2 countries?
Yes, it is. Even in the savannah, I think there are times when you see 2 male elephants getting together and try to solve the problem. So we're not in an animal farm here. We're having countries that have been just fighting for years, and the fighting is not helping one another, and it is important that they find a common ground together. It's realistic. We are human beings. We are not animals, and it is the metaphor was only used for us as Africans to materialize on what is our strong point and say, this is enough, let's sit together and find a solution. As we would have done in our villages, we bring people together under the palava tree and resolve the matter.
Well, hypothetically speaking, what would that common ground be? Would it be for the sake of unity, for the sake of Ubuntu? What would it be?
Well, for the sake of peace, not unity necessarily, but to recognize that the Sahara Republic, Western Republic, they also have their freedom, and they can actually try to develop on their own and find bilateral ties between Morocco and the Western Sahara, and say what are the common ground on which they can actually make ties. I would tell you something, for instance. If you may be aware that the same Sahara Republic has got 4 currencies. One is from the Algeria side, the other one is the Moroccan dinar, the other one is the Mauritanian money, and the other one is the Western Sahara money. So at some point we need to come to unify this country so that they can live peace. There are not that many that we need to fight each and every time.
Who do you assign blame to in terms of this whole dispute? Do you assign blame to the colonizer, being Spain, or do you assign blame to Morocco, who decided, okay, we're going to set up house here?
Well, we are not going to point fingers as Africans here, because in our African society, we usually say, if I point a finger to Mr. Pire right away, there's 1 finger going to you, there are 3 fingers coming back to me, and there's 1 finger that is going to the Creator. I call him the Creator. I'm not going to say God here because we have different views. So these 3 fingers that come back to me, that's the huge responsibility that I hold as an individual. So we cannot point fingers here, but rather find and seek peace for each and every country, each and every state, each and every leaders in their respective territory. So if we say it is the colonizer has gone long time ago, and reflecting on this, in 1957, Ghana got its independence. Let me broaden the scope here of the discussion. So in 1957, Ghana had its independence. So it's close to 61 years now. So at 61 years, my brother, I do believe African leaders should have the boldness to say we are mature enough to resolve our problems, not just saying, blaming the Western. They've gone long time ago. Maybe we didn't take our responsibility and independence freely, but I do believe that it is about time that we stand firm and say we need to have peace in the whole of Africa, not necessarily Western Sahara, but the whole of Africa. I think it's the time for them to be mature and say we need peace.
Now, Mr. Botha, I hear what you're saying in terms of having some sort of treaty between these 2 parties. But for the time being, we do know how things stand now. Now, In terms of countries that share relations with both the SADR and Morocco, how would you suggest that they, for the time being, as I mentioned, how do you suggest that they sort of navigate, particularly within the playing field, given the fact that they share relations with these two really polar opposite entities?
Well, I said it earlier on. We have the UN, and I said the UN has been there for decades, and there has been no solution. You would agree with me. Now, the African Union, we usually say that they are toothless. They have done nothing to eliminate crises in several other African countries. His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa is the head of the SADC. You would argue with me that the Western Sahara is not part of the SADC, but he is the head of a regional powerhouse, which is SADC. So he can actually play a big role as the new type of leaders that Africa needs to resolve the matter, so that we can have a platform where we would have bilateral, multilateral ties that could be economical, political, and find solution within the African continent and not out of the African continent, which we have been doing for many years now.
Now, we've been talking pro-SADR sentiments. We know of the support that Morocco also receives, particularly from the Arab League. Now, what do you think sort of inspired that level of support from the Arab League? Do you think could it be politically, economically, religiously motivated?
It's on multifaceted support that for Morocco. It's not necessarily the language, which is Arabic, because we would say the Western Sahara, they also speak Arabic. So it is economic, it is cultural, and it is at the various level that the Arabic League, we'll name them, they are supporting Morocco, which is also, in terms of economics, a country that can yield development for other countries. So at this level, I think Morocco is important in playing its role in the Arab League in Africa, as well as in the African continent, because we can have the transfer of skills in terms of technology in Africa. So for me, it's multifaceted dimension that we have there in Africa.
But then what happens? You mentioned a peaceful resolution, peaceful dialogues, but what happens if there isn't a treaty? What next?
We need a truce. I think we Africans, I'm going to say this and again, over and again, Africans used to resolve their issues amicably. So we would sit as many times as we can into debate, round table, and find the solution to the crisis that has been going on for decades in the Western Sahara. What is at stake here? It's the fishery, because we know that the Western Sahara is rich, the wealth is the fishery, and at the same time, you've got the phosphates that France and other countries want to have, because at the basis, it's not only the Western Sahara, it's many African countries where the West wants the minerals or the products that are in that country. So I do think at this point of time, we need to find a solution to end all the crises, all the conflicts in Africa, so that we could yield development in the rest of Africa. Listening to these issues about migration, listening to the news about the refugees, it doesn't make sense to me as an African, because you and I know that if I come to your country, I think you're from Zambia when I hear the name. So if I come to your country and I'm in front of your door in the village, you will not tell me to sit there and give me a newspaper. Instead, you will welcome me in your house and give me food and a palm wine, and then we will share that Ubuntu. So it is important that Africans understand our humanity that we had many centuries ago. And for me, it's key and critical that we find a solution. We will find the solution. And His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, we appeal to him to be the new African leader to Mamina with his campaign to go forward and find peace for all the countries in Africa that are going through severe conflicts and that are also having trouble.
All right, Mr. Botha, thank you so much for your time. Genuinely appreciated.
Thank you.
Now, in other news now, coming up for the moment, after the break, is AfricaTonight Media Holdings Chairman, Mr. Mzwanele Manye's announcement of the new shareholders.